We're going to Seattle, early 2000s, where Jeff Bezos saw this very familiar silent theft of minutes happening, and it drove him absolutely crazy.
Right, so let's set the scene. You're in a high-stakes conference room at Amazon. You've got, say, 5, maybe 10 senior VPs around a table. These are people whose hourly rates are just, they're staggering. Laptops are open. Everyone's calendar is already pinging them about their next meeting. Every single minute in that room has this invisible, very high price tag.
And then the presentation begins. And back then, it was almost always a PowerPoint deck. It looks good, you know? The headlines are clean, the charts look solid, the story seems tidy, it feels like progress. But that feeling, that sort of competence, Bezos realized that was the entire trap.
It was a total illusion.
Yeah.
Because the presentation would get going maybe 5 or 6 slides in, and the presenter, who's focused on, the bullet points and the aesthetics, hasn't actually stress tested the logic underneath it all.
Yeah,
so the
sure.
conversation it drifts into what one of the sources calls the familiar swamp.
The swamp, yeah.
It's all the questions that should have been answered before anyone even walked into the room.
You can just picture it. A VP leans in and goes, wait, back on slide 7, what's the core assumption behind that 40% growth number? Is that seasonal? And then someone else jumps in, yeah, and how did you get the customer acquisition cost? Are we looking at net or gross here?
And that's the moment. That's the theft. The second the presenter hesitates, or even worse, says, oh, that's a great question, let me just pull up the spreadsheet. That footnote, that piece of context that should have been there, wasn't. So now, instead of deciding something, this entire group of very expensive adults has to stop for, 30 or 40 minutes and basically reconstruct the presenter's thinking for them in real time.
And this is what you mean by clarity arriving late. Everyone in that room is now a hostage to one person's lack of preparation. So what do? They start multitasking. They check their phones. Their attention just drifts because they're spending all their energy decoding, not deciding.
Bezos had this great line. He said, PowerPoint gives you permission to gloss over ideas. It forces you to jam complexity into these sterile bullet points, right? It obscures the connections between ideas, and it lets the presenter get away with prioritizing persuasion over actual substance. His analysis was, it was brutal. If the group has to do the heavy lifting to figure out your logic, you have outsourced your prep cost to them. And you've outsourced it to the most expensive resource you have.
So the solution wasn't, getting better slide software. It was a fundamental shift. He forced everyone to pay the thinking cost up front. He just got rid of the decks and switched to narrative memos. And that's the organizational move that makes this whole principle work.
Precisely. And this is what created that now infamous Amazon ritual. Meetings there don't start with someone talking. They start in complete silence. A dense 4 to 6 page narrative memo is handed out, and everyone, from Bezos down, just reads. It's a study hall period where the entire room absorbs the exact same highly detailed context at the exact same time.
And that silence, which I've heard can last 20, even 30 minutes, it sounds awkward, but it's so incredibly productive. Because you can't bluff your way through 4 pages of prose. You can't hide sloppy thinking behind a nice-looking chart or a cool stock photo.
No, you can't. One source put it perfectly. He said if the memo is unclear or poorly argued, it becomes painfully obvious fast. All the ambiguity, all the hidden gaps that a slide deck lets you get away with, they're just instantly exposed when you're forced to connect paragraphs and build a real narrative. You have to write incomplete sentences. Your logic has to hold up.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second, because forcing everyone to write these dense, rigorous memos, this writing tax, doesn't that actually slow things down? For a company that wants to be innovative and move fast, isn't that a huge barrier, especially if you just have a new idea you want to pitch quickly?
And that's the exact trade-off they decided to make, intentionally. The resistance at first was huge, especially from engineering teams who felt like, hey, writing is admin work, we build things. But Bezos' argument was, look, while writing the memo takes longer for the individual, the speed of decision-making for the group goes up exponentially.
So you're trading individual slowness for group speed.
Exactly. The author is forced to do the most expensive part, the analysis, the documentation, the stress testing, on their own time. So the meeting time, which again is the most expensive collaborative resource, can be 100% focused on debate, on refinement, and on making a decision. Not on decoding the basics. You shift the burden. And that's the core principle right there. Clarity is courtesy. Preparation is respect.
That is a fundamentally different way to think about collaboration. It's not just about sharing ideas. It's about how you value the other person's attention. You earn leverage, whether it's capital or trust, by signaling, I will not spend your life minute casually.
And think about the artifact it creates. The memo system automatically gives you this clean document that becomes the canonical record of the decision. It lays out the options, the trade-offs, and, crucially, it leaves a paper trail, so you don't have to have the same conversation again next week. It kills that cycle of memory politics.
Okay, so let's make this really actionable for someone listening who doesn't work at Amazon. How do you start using this mindset tomorrow?
The first and easiest thing is to just replace your rambling status meetings with written updates. If all the information can be put in a document that takes 3 minutes to read, you send the document. You do not schedule 30 minutes of airtime just to read it out loud. That's a direct translation of the memo culture.
And you force the decision out of the fog right away. Don't bury the lead. At the very top of your email or your one-pager, write the decision sentence.
Okay.
Something like, today we need to decide X because of Y and success looks like Z. You're respecting their time by getting straight to the point.
And this one is critical. Explicitly list your assumptions. Don't make the other person play detective, trying to figure out what you meant by a certain projection. Just listing them out is an act of clarity that stops so many arguments before they even start. It proves you've paid the thinking cost.
I think that silent reading time is key too, even if it's just 5 minutes at the start of a meeting for a dense email. Just synchronizing everyone's context is such a powerful gift of time. You prevent all that low-level, time-sucking confusion that happens when half the room has read the pre-read and the other half is just winning it.
And if you're the one running the meeting, you end it with a written receipt, a little what-when recap. It's like a screenshotable block of text that becomes the respect contract. It prevents the 3 follow-up meetings you'd normally need.
Which leads us to a great maxim to wrap this up. Pay the writing tax so others don't pay the meeting bill.
That's it. It's a voluntary tax you pay to accelerate the whole group.
Now let's shift. We go from the organizational rigor of Amazon to the relentless individual ambition of the basketball court. If Bezos was all about preparing before the meeting, let's look at someone who was obsessed with protecting the time around the meeting. We're talking about Kobe Bryant.
Right. So we're changing the venue, but the principle is exactly the same. We're in Las Vegas. It's the summer of 2008. This is the legendary USA basketball camp, and the stakes could not be higher. The whole mission is to restore American dominance after some really embarrassing losses on the world stage.
And that roster was just stacked. I mean, LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony. But we all know talent alone is never enough. The culture, the habits, something had to change. And then you have Kobe Bryant. His intensity is already the stuff of legend, but here it gets refined into this powerful idea, schedule hygiene.
The stories from that camp are just incredible, and they all center on this pre-dawn work. Tim Grover, his trainer, and players like Jason Kidd, they all talked about these extra sessions. Grover mentioned Kobe setting up training that started at these absurd hours. There was a 4:30 a.m. bike ride in the Las Vegas heat. I mean, that's just brutal. And this was all happening before the official Olympic camp day even began.
When you hear that, I think the first reaction is just to file it under, Kobe's insane work ethic or Mamba mentality. But what our research suggests is that this was something way more strategic. It was a deeper move that connects directly to this idea of time respect.
It wasn't just grinding for the sake of grinding. The point was to refuse to make his personal obsession everyone else's scheduling problem. Think about it. If the official team practice is at 11 a.m. and you have team meals, media sessions, recovery, the respectful way to get your extra work in isn't to demand more of the shared time. It's to do it completely off the shared path.
That's fascinating because it's almost counterintuitive. The most intense guy in the room is also the most respectful of the schedule. What does that say about that common image we have of the obsessed genius who, shows up late and makes everyone wait because their work is just so important?
It says that image is the definition of immaturity. Kobe was operating with a very high level of maturity. That pre-dawn training sent this powerful nonverbal signal to the entire team. It said, I will carry my extra weight without stealing your shared minutes, and I promise I will be ready and focused when our official clock starts.
Yeah, Jason Kidd told that story about walking into the team breakfast, thinking he was one of the first guys up, only to see Kobe already done with the workout, showered, eating, and looking completely fresh. The psychological pressure that must have created was huge, but it was the right kind. It was pressure based on admiration, not on resentment.
Exactly. It's a massive silent deposit into the team's trust ledger.
Yeah.
And that changes the whole culture. It raises the bar for what prepared even means. And, it ultimately influenced the outcome, that triumphant gold medal win in Beijing in 2008, which put the U.S. team back on top.
So let's connect this back to business, to building wealth. High performers don't work in a vacuum. They need teams, partners, clients. If your ambition is constantly creating time chaos for other people, you're always starting late, moving deadlines, your quick calls always go long, people might admire your drive, but they will quietly stop choosing to build with you because you create what we're calling calendar drag.
Calendar drag, that's the silent tax you put on everyone around you. It's the compounding effect of all these little acts of disrespect. If I know that working with you means 5 minutes of waiting, 2 last-minute reschedules, and a 10-minute overrun every single time, I'm just going to subconsciously start deprioritizing our work. The principle here is so clear. Respect for time is leadership.
So it's not just about managing your own calendar, it's about designing your efforts so it integrates reliably into other people's lives. The Kobe pattern is all about schedule hygiene, getting your extra work done outside of the shared day so you're not pushing the costs onto the group.
And just think about the compounding effect of being reliable. Investors trust the founder who sends clean updates on time. Customers trust the operator who delivers when they promised. Time respect isn't just nice to have, it's a competitive edge. Because time is the only resource we all have equally, and you can't refund it once it's wasted.
Okay, let's make this actionable for our everyday commitments. The first tactic is about being ready before the clock starts, not just being on time. It's having your materials open, your notes reviewed, the first question already framed in your mind. That signals respect.
And you follow Kobe's lead. If you have your own deep work, your own extra practice, do it off the shared path. Protect the hours you owe other people from your own personal demands.
I love this next one because it builds goodwill so fast. Default to shorter than promised. If you book a 30-minute meeting, aim to finish in 20. You give 10 minutes back to someone and you instantly create this psychological relief. It's a powerful currency.
And for when the inevitable happens, traffic, an emergency, you're just running late, update early. The disrespect is in the silence. A proactive notice is the repair. It gives the other person agency to manage their time instead of just passively waiting for you.
The maxim for this section, it really hits home. Ambition that steals minutes isn't ambition, it's debt.
It is. It's borrowed time, and you will eventually have to pay it back, usually with diminished trust.
All right, we're moving back to the corporate world now, specifically to the challenge of running meetings that actually produce something. If Bezos solved the input problem with the memo, Andy Grove solved the output problem with just ruthless agenda discipline.
We're in Santa Clara, mid-1980s. Intel, the company that basically invented the modern semiconductor industry, is facing an existential crisis. Japanese manufacturers are just crushing them in the memory chip market, and this was the product line that had defined Intel's entire identity, their early success.
And the feeling inside the company wasn't this, spectacular collapse. It was worse. It was just the slow, expensive dread. Meetings were dragging on. They were circular. Lots of talk, lots of analysis, but no big decisions. The problem was the emotional attachment. It's really hard to kill a product when that product is woven into your company's DNA.
And Andy Grove, along with his co-founder Gordon Moore, they were stuck in that same trap. Endless discussions, more and more data, but they were failing to decide what to do. Grove realized they needed a tool, a technique to break that emotional attachment that was making these meetings feel necessary, even though they were producing absolutely nothing.
And that leads to this famous move, the outsider test. Grove just forces this cognitive distance. He looks at Moore and he asks, if we got fired and a new CEO walked in tomorrow with no nostalgia for Intel's history, what would that CEO do with the memory chip business?
Moore's answer was instant. It was almost painfully obvious. He said he would get Intel out of the memory business. And Grove's response was like a gavel slam. Then why don't we walk out the door, come back in, and do it ourselves? And that moment right there, it forced the action.
And it gave them a repeatable method for time respect. It was about using the meeting not just to have a discussion, but to produce a measurable output. They got out of the DRAM market, announced it in October of '85, and Grove later called it the best decision they ever made.
The lesson there is just so profound. They stopped spending thousands of hours discussing a decision that really reality had already made for them. This is the principle. Undecided work is expensive time leakage.
Time leakage, that's a critical concept. The costliest waste isn't doing nothing. It's having conversations that sound productive. You're talking strategy, you're looking at data, but they don't produce a decision or an owner or a deadline. Grove reframed the meeting not as a virtue, but as a rigid container for outputs.
And we really have to get the economics here. Wasted time in a meeting isn't linear, it's multiplicative. If you have 10 high-level people in a room and you waste 10 minutes, that's not 10 minutes. That's 100 minutes of payroll time just gone. But it actually gets worse.
How does it get worse than that?
Because every unclear meeting creates a costly second phase, the follow-up time. The time spent re-explaining the vague outcome, fixing misunderstandings, clarifying who was supposed to do what. A culture of sloppy, decisionless meetings just teaches your best people that their focused time will always be interrupted and stolen. And that leads to cynicism. Grove knew that fast, clear decisions are a profit engine.
Let's talk more about that outsider test because it's such a powerful mental tool. It's designed to break that identity attachment. We all do this. We feel like we have to continue a project because we started it or because it's something we're good at, even if the world has moved on.
Absolutely. The outsider test forces you to apply this ruthless objective logic. You just ask yourself, if I had no history here, no emotional skin in the game, and I only cared about maximizing output for the next 18 months, would I still be doing this? It shifts the question from how do we save this thing to what is the most productive path forward. It's about respecting the organization's time by detaching from past success.
So if we want to adopt Grove's mission-oriented meeting mindset, what are the actionable tactics for us?
First, you have to name the required output before you even send the invitation. Is the output a decision, a plan, an approval? If you can't name the output in one word, don't schedule the meeting. You probably need to write a memo first.
Second, send a clear, time-stamped agenda. This is how you enforce the output container. Don't write, 10:00 a.m., talk about marketing. Right, 10:00 to 10:25 a.m., pick one channel owner and assign a budget cap. That constraint forces an output.
Third, be ruthless about the roster. Spectators are just paid boredom, and they add drag. Only include people who can actually decide or execute. If someone's just there to listen, send them the memo and the meeting receipt afterwards.
And fourth, you end every single meeting with that written receipt. Decisions made, owners assigned, next check-in date. It's the contract that proves the time was well spent. It closes the loop.
You have to integrate that outsider test, even if it's just for yourself. What am I holding on to because of my identity, not because it's necessary?
Which brings us to the maxim. A meeting that doesn't ship a decision is just a polite way to steal time. Now we move to the art of compression. If Andy Grove made sure every meeting had a decision, Steve Jobs made sure every presentation delivered the absolute maximum meaning in the minimum amount of time. We're talking about rehearsal as an ethical obligation.
We're going to San Francisco, January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs is on stage at Macworld about to introduce the iPhone. And our memory of that is, the brilliant presentation, the black turtleneck, the revolutionary device.
Right, but the real act of time respect wasn't the show itself. It was the insane, often agonizing preparation that happened for months before that day. The presentation looked effortless, and that was the entire point. That was the hard-won result.
Yeah, Bryn Schlender, one of his biographers, he talked about watching Jobs spend entire days just running through rehearsals of a single presentation. And he wasn't just practicing his lines, he was tweaking the lighting, he was adjusting the slide order. He would stop the whole room because a cue was a half-second late or an animation was just slightly off.
And why? Why that level of fanaticism over a lighting cue? Because all that effort, all that pain, it moves it off stage. The audience only ever experiences the final outcome, not the struggle to get there. If the flow is sloppy or a demo fails or the presenter has to stop and recover, the audience doesn't admire the effort. They feel the truth, which is, my time is being wasted because this person wasn't prepared.
That cognitive friction, that's the deeper layer of time disrespect.
Yeah.
If your message is fuzzy, the audience spends their precious mental energy just trying to decode what you mean. If your demo is shaky, they spend their time watching you recover from failure instead of absorbing the brilliance of your product. Jobs just refused, fundamentally, to make the audience pay for his lack of prep.
This kills that really common, really corrosive habit of performing your thinking in front of people. We see it all the time. Someone presents a rough draft and they call it collaboration, or they ask the audience for patience and call it authenticity. Jobs treated every minute of the audience's attention as something he had to earn, not something he was owed.
And that's the critical principle here. Preparation is the price of admission to other people's attention. People reward relief. If your work is reliably tight, fast, and worth their attention, they give you the most valuable currency there is, more access to their calendars, to their capital, to their trust. His whole system was about compressing meaning into minutes.
But hold on, the preparation time for that iPhone launch was massive. Like months of dedicated internal work. How do you justify that trade-off?
You justify it by the size of the audience and the stakes. If you're speaking to 5,000 people and you shave 5 minutes off your presentation because you rehearsed it to perfection, you've just saved 25,000 minutes of collective human attention. The cost of your prep, while high, is dwarfed by the value you save for everyone else. That's the math of time respect.
That's a fascinating way to frame it. It's an ethical obligation. You have to invest the time privately so you don't waste it publicly.
Exactly. The presentation is the product of the preparation. If the presentation is full of friction, the product is sloppy, no matter how good the slides look.
So how do we apply this ethical rehearsal to our own work? Whether it's a client pitch or just a department update.
First, rehearse the transitions and handoffs, not just your individual bullet points. The sources are clear on this. Most of the time is wasted in those gray areas. Between ideas, between speakers, or when the presenter's just rambling, looking for their next thought. Scripting those handoffs eliminates the time leaks. No more. So, anyway, next slide.
Second, always design a fail-safe demo. For us, that means you have your plan A, but you also have plan B ready to go, a screenshot or video of the perfect outcome. And you have a single practice recovery line if plan A goes wrong. You anticipate the failure so other people don't have to watch you struggle with it.
Third, cut your content to 70% of the time you're given. If you have 30 minutes, you prepare 20 minutes of airtight material. That buys you space for real Q&A, for a moment of reflection, for just being human without racing the clock and disrespecting the end time.
And finally, you make the one thing, the core sentence they have to remember, explicitly clear in the first minute and the last minute. Don't make them hunt for it. Give them the maximum yield right away.
And the closing maxim here really reinforces the ethics of it. Rehearse until your message is fast, because their minutes are not renewable.
Our focus shifts now. We've talked about individual mastery of time. Now we're looking at systemic operational standards of time respect. This is where courtesy becomes a fierce competitive weapon. We're going to Dallas, spring of 1972, to the birth of Southwest Airlines.
The context here is just pure survival. Southwest is this tiny startup, barely solvent. After all these brutal legal fights just to be allowed to fly, the company was hemorrhaging cash. They literally had $143 in the bank.
$143. Wow. So the president, Lamar Muse, he makes this heartbreaking decision. They have to sell their fourth Boeing 737 just to get cash to survive. But they had already built their entire brand on promising customers frequency lots of flights every day. To keep that promise with only 3 planes, they had to do something revolutionary.
And that goal was set by their VP of Terminal Ops, a guy named Bill Franklin. He set the non-negotiable standard. The 10-minute turn. The clock started the second the plane hit the gate. They had to unload passengers, clean the plane, refuel it, reload new passengers, and push back from the gate in 10 minutes. At the time, other airlines were taking an hour, sometimes more.
A 10-minute turn, that sounds impossible. I mean, given the industry standards back then, was there a lot of internal resistance to a deadline that violent?
Oh, massive resistance. People said it was ridiculous, that it violated every known procedure. But Franklin operationalized it. He basically told the team, we're going to achieve this, or we will replace people until we have a team that can. He shifted the focus from if we can to how we must. The time cost was existential. Everyone had to own it.
And the sources say they got really inventive. They actually studied professional racing pit crews to break down every single microstep. They made the work all hands. You had pilots helping to tidy the cabin, gate agents hauling trash. Everyone was cross-trained.
That's the crucial part. It required shared ownership. One slow link in the chain, one person waiting because that's not my job, and the whole promise was broken for everyone. They were looking at cycle time, the total time it takes for a process to complete, as their primary financial asset.
And that brings us right to the principle. Time is the hidden asset. Respect isn't just being nice. It is operationalized through standards and shared ownership. Most companies just tolerate waiting. They say, oh, that's just how long it takes. Southwest treated that statement as an organizational lie that was actively costing them money.
And the financial leverage is just staggering. A Boeing 737 is an asset that costs thousands of dollars an hour just sitting on the ground. By cutting that turnaround from an hour to 10 minutes, Southwest massively increased how much they could use each plane. One plane could fly 6 or 7 more flights in a day than a competitor's plane.
So shorter cycle time means more revenue per asset, which lowers your unit costs, which then lets you have the low-fare strategy that became their entire brand. Their ability to be fast and reliable was directly responsible for their profitability.
And customers saw the rush, and they loved it. They saw the speed as competence. It was a signal that the company wasn't wasting their time or their money. And that built a reputation for efficiency that compounded for decades.
So the deeper lesson is that your reputation is built on whether you reduce friction in other people's lives or add to it. And systemic time respect needs a high non-negotiable standard. Franklin set it at 10 minutes, and it needs shared ownership.
This is the difference between individual hustle, like Kobe, and institutional design, like Southwest. Both are respecting time, but Southwest baked that respect into the process itself.
Okay, so let's look at the actionable tactics. How do we apply this pit crew mindset to our own work?
First, just pick one turnaround metric in your own world. It could be your proposal response time or how long it takes to onboard a new client. Name it and measure what it is right now.
And then you run a pit crew review. You list every single step in that process, and you figure out which steps are happening sequentially just out of habit. I wait for your email, then I start my part, versus which steps could actually run in parallel. You have to dissect it like a race crew trying to shave off fractions of a second.
And make that cycle time everyone's job, not just one department's problem. Find the bottlenecks and create all-hands triggers. If the design team is waiting on copy, anyone who can write jumps in to help.
And critically, pre-stage what people always need. Templates, access codes, the right forms, the right tools. Anything that stops people from having to say, I'm just waiting on so-and-so, is an act of time respect that crushes cycle time.
The maxim here is really a challenge. If you make people wait for you, you're charging them, whether you invoice it or not. That drag is a cost they're paying.
We end our deep dive where mastery so often begins with the absolute basics and the relentless standard of reliability. We're going back to elite sports, to Westwood, Los Angeles, and Coach John Wooden.
So we're in the mid-1960s, and UCLA basketball is on its way to becoming the most dominant dynasty in college sports history. And the players, these are highly recruited stars. They show up on campus expecting, complex plays, dazzling strategies, high-tech training.
And instead, on the very first day of practice, they get a lesson from John Wooden on the most basic, almost insulting part of the game: how to properly put on their socks and shoes.
It sounds absurd, but it's a step-by-step instruction. How to pull the sock up tight, how to get rid of the wrinkles that cause blisters, how to lace the shoes correctly. The deeper lesson was about preventing avoidable problems. It was about mastering the knowns, protecting your body to prevent a 5-minute delay from a blister in the middle of a championship game.
So the lesson immediately goes from being about fabric to being about honor. It was a non-negotiable standard. And Wooden was absolutely rigid on punctuality. Never be late. To practice, to meetings, to the team bus, to class, never.
This is where that standard of reliability just snaps into focus. A team is a shared calendar. It's a shared resource. If one person is late, everyone waits. The whole day shifts. Wooden treated lateness not as some harmless personality quirk, but as a structural disrespect. A tiny theft that, when repeated, leads to cultural decay.
And he modeled it himself. He was always early, and he insisted his players be too. For an 18-year-old kid, the path to greatness started with pulled-up socks, tied shoelaces, and being on time every single day. That choice, to master the basics, to be reliable, is a fundamental choice to protect the group's time.
The core principle is just so clear. Punctuality is a promise. It's a promise that says, I won't make you pay for my disorganization. Wooden's definition of respect was entirely behavioral. It was conduct that prevents harm to others. And being late harms others. It forces them to wait. It disrupts their focus. It steals their minutes.
Why do you think that simple act, just being on time, is often so much harder for people than, say, a complex strategy?
Because being late is often rooted in emotional mismanagement, a lack of discipline, a failure to prioritize. It forces you to confront your own failures and self-management. Wooden's genius was that he made it a character issue, not a logistics issue. He didn't just want talented players. He wanted reliable men.
And that's how the trust ledger is maintained. Every time you're late, you make a withdrawal. Every time you're early and ready, you make a deposit.
And that reliability compounds. It turns into opportunity, into trust, into flexibility, because you've proven you won't waste the one thing people can't get back. And the structural solution is always better than the emotional apology. The default habit is to say, oh, I'm so sorry, traffic was bad. Wooden demanded a structural response. Build a life that doesn't create predictable delays for other people.
Let's get to the tactics here. Adopt a start early, end on time rule. Practice, or your meeting starts precisely when it's scheduled, not 5 minutes later. You start with the first agenda item on the dot.
And this is crucial. The bar is ready, not just on time. That means your materials are open, your notes are prepared, your first question is already in your head. Showing up on time, but then needing 5 minutes to boot up your laptop is still time theft.
Create a 2-minute buffer ritual before any commitment. If the meeting is at 10:00, your personal deadline is 9:58. That buffer just prevents those tiny, frantic spirals of lateness that spill into someone else's time.
And if you are late one time, create a fix. A systemic adjustment. Leave 10 minutes earlier. shorten the meeting before it. Don't just offer another empty apology. You fix the system, not just the feeling. A fix demonstrates structural respect.
Because, as Wooden would say, if people have to wait for you, you're spending their life without asking.
So we've covered 6 really different domains here. The boardroom, the basketball court. But they all converge on this single high-leverage idea. Time respect is a competitive advantage.
Yeah, we saw Jeff Bezos use writing the memo to force clarity and put the thinking cost on the individual. We saw Kobe Bryant rising early to maintain schedule hygiene, showing that his ambition wouldn't create debt for the team. And Andy Grove running the agenda for pure output, protecting everyone's time from undecided work.
Steve Jobs treated rehearsal as an ethical duty to eliminate friction for his audience. Southwest Airlines used systemic standards like the 10-minute turn to weaponize their operational efficiency. And John Wooden insisted on reliability, teaching that just mastering the basics is what protects the entire team.
At the end of the day, this deep dive isn't about becoming some kind of efficiency robot or a ruthless clock watcher. It's about earning leverage. When you consistently deliver relief from time waste, when you're the one who shows up ready, whose presentations are tight, whose promises are met, you become the person of choice. You become the partner people actively want to build with, to invest in. You're signaling that you respect the most finite, most precious asset.
And we've been focused this whole time on preventing time theft from others. We talked about Grove's outsider test. What would a ruthless new CEO do if they walked into Intel today?
So here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. Apply that exact same outsider test to your own calendar right now. If a ruthless CEO walked into your life today with no nostalgia for your current commitments, what meeting, what project, what responsibility are you still holding on to because of identity attachment and not because of necessity? What are you making yourself wait for? What are you wasting your own time on? The same principles of clarity, preparation, and output apply to the time you owe yourself. Start by cutting the things you know are creating your own personal calendar drag.